Good morning. Today's daf is daf Zion. We are at the very top of Zion Amud Aleph. And let me share my screen and we'll get started. We are at a good starting point because yesterday uh, uh, we concluded with Rebbe. One second. Hold on just a second. We are not at the very top of Zion Amud Aleph, but we're near the top of Zion Amud Aleph. Yesterday we concluded with Rebbe ruling based on testimony regarding Rebbe Meir's practice that vegetables in Beit Shan do not require the taking of Truma and Meiser, as Beit Shan is not part of Israel. And so Rebbe justified his novel ruling, which broke with the practices of his ancestors, by noting that King Chizkiah also similarly destroyed the copper snake that Moshe had made because it was being used as an idol. And it was something that King Asa and King Yehoshaphat, who had both destroyed lots of idols, had not done. And so, despite both of them, being known for destroying idols, they didn't do it. And yet, King Chizkiah did it himself. And we begin, I'll just note that we'll start with the very top of Zion and Aleph. Ela makom hinichu lo abosav lehis gaderbo. Chizkiyahu's forefathers allowed him to create a place for him to to do something to distinguish himself. And so Rebbe continues, Af ani. So too I am doing something. Makom enichuli avosai his gaderbo. My ancestors also left me a place to do something and make myself great, namely by recognizing that even though they had considered Beit Shan to be part of Israel and therefore you couldn't eat the produce there without taking Trumas and Maasros, I recognize that it's not really part of Israel. And so, as a result, at least with respect to vegetables, I'm going to allow you to eat the vegetables based on the testimony, effectively, of Rebbe Meir, that you can eat those vegetables without taking Trumas and Meiser. And so, the Gemara reaches a number of conclusions as we pick up with the last word on the second line. Mitkan, from here, we see Talmud Chacham she'amar dabar halacha, that when a Talmud Chacham says something that's some halachic ruling, she'ein mazichin oto, we are not mazichin him. Now, what does mazichin mean? Well, let's take a look at Rashi, and he'll tell us what mazichin means and tell us the greater context of what it means by saying a halachic ruling. So take a look at the second line of Rashi, and you can keep your finger on Rashi because we'll be going back and forth at least for the beginning of today's daf. So mikan, second line, shira'inu shekabel. Shekibel Rebbe Edozu, that from the fact that we see that Rebbe accepted this testimony, v'limed himena, and learned from it, aval pisha davar temahu, even though it was a wondrous item. Shaharei me'olam hayunoagin bo isser, because notwithstanding Rebbe Meir's practice, the general practice had been to consider it prohibited to eat the produce without taking trumas and maestros. Lamanu she'ein mazichin Talmud Chacham, and so we see from here that we are not going to be miziach a Talmud Chacham, ha'omer davar halacha chidush, that if he says something new in terms of halacha, that isn't a basis to cause somebody to be concerned. Lomar lo shamata, and to say to him, no, you never heard that, because yes, it may be true that he never heard it, but that doesn't matter. So ein mezichin, and what does ein mezichin mean? Ein mabdilin oto mishmuato. We're not going to try and separate him from what he said. Lomar chazor bach, to tell him that you have to retract it. So that's mezichin. Back into the Gemara. Va'amri la, fourth line in the Gemara, middle of the line. Va'amri la ein maznichin also. And so some people say that it's not mezichin, but it was maznichin. And what does maznichin mean? So thankfully, Rashi helps us out. Maznichin, mishaktzin es dvarav. We don't say that his words are disgusting or repulsive. And so, as a result, that is the second approach. Meaning, again, it's all going to be in the same vein that we're going to say that when somebody teaches a new halacha, we are not going to try and get him to retract it. And similarly, va'amrila ein mazchichen oso, that we're not going to be maschiachim. And again, back into Rashi, third of the narrow lines, mazchichen lomar gavatcha garama alach shalo hitita ozen lishmoa davar kilchaso mipi rabcha. It's because you're so haughty that that you are didn't pay enough attention to listen to your teachers. So again, we're going to say we're not going to accuse him of being haughty, and say, and that's the bottom line. The point is that even if he says something novel, sholishna achrina, an alternative language, again, same concept of lifting, as maschiach being some kind of lifting, magbiin umisalkin otomid dvarav. Again, similar to the first category, we're not going to cause him to remove himself from his words. Okay, so Manda Amar Mazichin, the one who says that the word that we used was Mazichin, Kediksiv, Lo Yizach HaChoshen. Well, when you take a look at Shmo Perek Kavchet, Pasuk Kavchet, so it uses a similar word, Yizach, as meaning lift. The Choshen will not be, or separate. The Choshen will not be separated from the ephod, is the continuation of the pasuk. So Manda Amar ein maznichen, and when it comes to mazniach, that's similar to the following pasuk. It's from Echa Perek Gimel pasuk Lamed Aleph. Diksiv ki lo yiznach laolam Hashem, that Hashem doesn't reject forever, and so again yisnach means reject. Umanda Amar Mazchichin, and the one who says it's Mazchichin, so then Titania, that's a brisa, Mishirabu Zichuche Halev, when the people got lifted hearts. And so lifted hearts is a statement about haughtiness. When they became more haughty, Rabu Machlokas B'Yisrael, and that is obviously certainly the case. The more haughty you are, the more likely you are to get into disputes with people because you're not going to recognize your own mistakes. And here we had the one more Rashi, Zichuche. Take a look at the next Rashi. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Zechuche lashon gvoi halev. It's a language of haughtiness. Shalo diktek mipi rabo. You weren't careful about the kol tzarcho. You weren't careful as you needed to be about investigating what your teacher said. V'samchu alibam, and you instead relied on your own heart and on your own thinking, and that is not necessarily a good thing, except that we say that you don't say that, meaning that you can obviously you need to do sufficient investigation into your teaching, but into what you are taught, but you also have the ability to think for yourself. So an important Gemara from that perspective on this interesting topic. So we go now back to return to Rebbe's ruling that Beit Shan is effectively not part of Israel. And so the Gemara presents several challenges. So Maskif La Yehuda Braid the Rabbi Yeshimon ben Pazi, my Ika, Ika Lamanda Amr de Beit Shan Lab Eretz Yisrael. How could anybody say that Beit Shan is not part of Israel? V'haksiv lo horish Menashe as Beit Shan, v'es benoseh, v'es Tanakh, v'es benoseh. The pasuk itself in Shoftim specifically lays out that in fact Menashe was acquired this as part of their land, but was unable to drive out the people who were living in Beit Shan and its areas, and Tanakh and its areas, and so that highlights the fact that clearly it was part of Eretz Yisrael. Ishtamete. Yehuda, the son of Shimon ben Pazi, had forgotten Hada Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas, what was said in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas, Sha'amar Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, who said it in the name of Elazar ben Shamua, Harbe Kirakim Kvashum Ole Mitzrayim. There were lots of areas that were conquered by the people who left Egypt, V'lo Kvashum Ole Babel, but they were not conquered by the people who left Bavel. The kasavar, and we're following the approach kedusha rishona kachal shaita lo kachal asulavu, that the original sanctification of Eretz Yisrael at the time it was conquered by the people who left Egypt, that was not a conquering for all times and did not sanctify the land forever. But and therefore, when the people of Babel came back and did not conquer that area, it was not considered part of Israel. V'hinichum kidei sheyismuchu aleihen aniyim b'shvius, and specifically, they left some areas that were part of Israel previously unsanctified in order to help the poor people so that they could actually create produce in Shvius years, so that way there would be more produce available, which would be helpful for the poor. So so that was question one and our response. Question number two, Amarle Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera, Baha Rabbi Meir, Allah ba'almahu da'acha. But 1 second, when Rabbi Meir ate a leaf, that's all he ate. He ate was a leaf. And Rashi explains, we're going to now again follow Rashi a bit. So let's start with the Rashi. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. From the bottom of Rashi's narrow lines, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 25 lines up. Allah ba'alma, da'achilas araihi, v'sharya ba'aretz. When you eat a snack, an achilat arai, a temporary meal, which is effectively what we would call a snack. When you eat a snack, that is permitted in Eretz Yisrael without taking trumas and maestros. So maybe that's all that Rebbe Meir did. So how do you know that in fact that Rebbe Meir was a fact showing that Beit Shan was not part of Eretz Yisrael? So Amarle ma'aguda achlei. Nah, he didn't eat just one leaf that was picked off. He ate from a whole bundle. And the law is, take a look at keeping your finger in Rashi, the next Rashi, ma'aguda achlei umish dimishin egad. Once you have a bundle of vegetables, asur la'achol arai, you can no longer eat from them a snack. Utnan, and now proving that point, back into the Gemara, Utnan, Yerakan Egad, Mishi Agade, that once that if you have a vegetable that is bundled, when you bundle it, that's when it's going to be subject to tithing, and you're no longer going to be able to eat a snack. As Rashi says, Haneged Shidarko Laogdo, if something has the custom of being bundled, Mishi Agade, Hukba lemais, it's now set aside and fixed lemaiser for taking meiser. Vines arbachilas arai, and therefore you can no longer eat a snack from it. So that was question number two. Question number three, the dilma lava daite. Well, 1 second, maybe this is all telling us that Rebbe Meir it's all because Rebbe Meir was not thinking about it. And as a result, he just forgot to take it. How do you know that wasn't what happened? So now so take a look at Rashi, Lavadaita, again, next Rashi, keeping your finger on Rashi. Lavadaita, Shachach, Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Meir simply forgot the lo asro, and he didn't take Meiser. Ula olam sfira le debaya sure. And really, he would think that Beit Shan would require Meiser to be taken. So, Hashta, Behemtem Shel Tzadikim, back into the Gemara, thank you, sorry about that, back into the Gemara, smack in the middle of the Gemara's lines. So, Hashta, Behemtem Shel Tzadikim, Eina Kadosh Baruch Hu, maybe Takala Al Yadam, Tzadikim Atzman Lo Kol Shekain, if in fact, we're going to see in a moment that the animals of righteous people, Hashem does not allow a mistake to happen through them. How could Hashem allow a mistake to happen through a tzaddik? Meaning, by watching tzaddikim and seeing what they do and copying them, Hashem would not allow people to derive a mistake from it. And so, as a result, that cannot be. The Dilma Iser Aleim Bimakom Acher. Well, 1 second, maybe he took Meiser from another place. Back in Rashi, again, keeping your finger on Rashi, and then after this Rashi, you'll be able to lift it for a bit. Mimakom Acher, Shema Havile Yerek Talush Bebeito. Maybe he had some cut vegetables in his house. Va'amar, and he said the following: Harehu mazer al agudazu. That vegetables that I had in my home, that they are going to be the meiser for this vegetable, this bunch of vegetables here. And so as a result, he really did take meiser. So lo nechshadu chaverim litrom shalom min hamokaf. So back into the Gemara. So we don't worry about chaverim that they are going to take trumas and maasros from something that's not right there. And so as a result, if it's not right there, they're not going to take trumas and maasros from it. And so as a result, he couldn't have done it from his house. The Dilma Nasan Ena Bitzadzev Ochel Bitzadachayar. All right, fine. He didn't go back to his house, but maybe within this one bundle, he said, I'm going to make this side of the bundle Truma and Meiser, and I'm going to eat from that side. So how come we don't think that that's what he did? So Amar Lei Chaziman Gabra Rabba Kamasid Alei. Look at who testified about Rabbi Meir. It was Rabbi Yeshua ben Zerus, and since he issued the testimony, it's for sure he was not going to allow this to fly. And so as a result, it's clear that it must have been good testimony. And in fact, what was assumed by Rebbe about what Rebbe Meir did is correct. And therefore, he was issued a correct ruling about Beit Shan.
What was the testimony that he made? Exactly. What was the testimony from Rebbe?
The testimony was that we saw at the end of the day yesterday was that Rebbe Meir ate a vegetable from Beit Shan. So that he ate a vegetable without taking trumos and maasros within Beit Shan. And that was the testimony. And from that, Rebbe determined, must be Beit Shan is not part of Eretz Yisrael with respect to trumos and maasros.
Oh, so we're not going through the rest of this, that it may have been, and he could have taken from his house, and he did this. None of that was the part of the testimony.
Correct. None of that was part of the testimony. The only thing that we added as part of the testimony was that it turned out that it was an aguda that he ate from. But everything else, and the other.
Why is he not chayav an aguda then?
Well, that's the point. It's not chayav on an aguda because it's not part of Eretz Yisrael.
Oh, okay. So that's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line, exactly. So, okay. So over the last several days, Rabbi Zera has referenced multiple.
So that machlochet still exists today. I know that in Israel, it's question whether Beit Shan is part of Israel or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not do any investigation on that front, so I don't know the answer to that.
I remember that. That's still. Today, there's still that discussion.
Interesting. Okay, so over the last several days, Rabbi Zera has referenced multiple times that God does not require that God does not allow, a mistake to happen through the animals of the righteous. So the Gemara shares the following story and telling us, "My behemtam shel tzaddikim." What is this whole thing with that Rabbi Zera kept referencing of the animals of tzaddikim? To Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair havaka azol lefidjon shvuyim. Well, there was a situation where Pinchas ben Yair was traveling in order to ransom to get some captives out of captivity, to redeem them out of captivity.
Well, we know his donkey was talking.
No, his donkey's not going to talk. This is not.
But that was part of it. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. They had this story with his donkey. Right.
Yeah, that's the story that we're gonna have right now. But it's not going to be. There's no talking by the donkey. But Pagabe Beginai Nahara, he came up to the river. This is the more fulsome version. There are versions of this story elsewhere in Chazal. It's in the Midrash in Bereshis. It's in I think it's in Shkalim. And it's in Demai Yerushalmi. But in any event, here Paga Be Ginai Nahara. He came up to the river Ginai. Amar Le, he says to the river, Ginai Chalokli Meimach Ve'evor Kapach. Split yourself so that I can go across. Amar Le, the river says back. So we have a river talking, but not, and we'll see. We'll take a quick look at the Tosos here. Amar Le, so the river says back, Atau lech lasos ritzon koncha. You're going to do the will of your maker. V'ani olech lo says ritzon koni. I'm doing the will of my maker also. Ata safek osef safek I ata osef. And with you, you're human. You may be successful. You may not be successful, and especially on the job that you're doing. Who knows whether you'll fulfill the redemption? Ani vaday osef. But what I do, I'm certainly going to fulfill when I go through. My water goes along my waterway. So Amrle, Rav Pinchas ben Yair says back, Im iata cholek, if you don't split for me, goes rani alecha shelo yavru b'cha mayim lo'olam. I'm going to make a gzera that no water will ever go through you again. So chalaklei, so the river split for him. Habahu gavra dahaba dare chite lepischa. So a man was traveling with presumably Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and he was carrying some wheat for Pesach. Amar le. So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair says. Now it's not clear who it's to, but you'll see that it must be to the river. Chalok le nami lahai. Split also for this guy. Deba mitzvah asik. He's busy doing a mitzvah. He's getting wheat for Pesach. So chalak so the river split for him as well. Habahu taya deliva bahadaihu. There was an Arab merchant who was traveling with them, who wasn't necessarily doing any kind of mitzvah. And yet Amar le, Pinchas ben Yair said to the river, Chalok le nami lahai. You also split for this one. Delo lema kakosim livnei levaya. So that it's not going to be said, hey, is this how they deal with the people who are traveling? If the people who are traveling with Jews, they leave them behind. So again, the river split. Now Tosos here. Take a look at the bottom Tosos. Amrle ata holech lasos ritzon koncha. So Tosos doesn't like the idea that this was the river itself speaking. So he says, Shema sar shel yam heishiv lo kach. Maybe it was the angel, the prince angel of the river that was responding in this way. Inami, or alternatively, Rabbi Pinchas haya machashev belibo shelakach haya meniach milichlok lo. Or maybe this is really all a conversation in Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair's head. Inyan zeh tzarich lefarish beperak kama de meseches avodah zarah gabi Rabbi Eliezer ben Doraja de Amar Shamayim bikshu alai rachamim. When we have the case of Rabbi Eliezer ben Dordaya, who's speaking to the mountains and to all the world about seeking mercy after he had done inappropriate actions, and so as a result, the similar thing can be said there. The bottom line is that it's interesting that Tosos says here that it doesn't take this sort of is it taking this very literally, but then as a result, because of the purpose of being brought, that we're supposed to take this entire story very literally, he then says that it must, modifies how we understand the talking river to either be an internal conversation to Rabbi Pinchas or Ben Yair, or changes it to saying that it's some angel on its behalf. Okay, in any event, quick aside, the Gemara makes, Amar of Yosef, Kama Nafish Gavra. How great is this guy, Mimoshe Vishitin Rivyan? He's better than even the Moshe with the 600,000 Jews. The Ilu Hasam Chad Zimna, Vahacha Tlasa Zimnin. Moshe only divided the Yam Suf once, but here the river was divided 3 separate times. Now you can say that maybe it was here also only once, meaning that Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair just had the river remain split. Ella Kimosha Vishitin Ravan. Rather say that what Rav Yosef said was not how great is Pinchas ben Yair, that he's even greater than Moshe, but rather he's as great as Moshe. So back into our story. Ikla lahu ushpiza. He comes to an inn. Ramule sa'are lechamre. And so they poured some seirim, some barley, for his donkey. Lo achal. The donkey didn't eat it. As we now turn to Zion Amabet. Chabtinu. They said they thought that maybe he just was a more refined creature and needed to refine it. So they sifted it. Lo achal. No, he still didn't need it. Nakrinu. They cleaned it. They used their own hands to just pull out anything that was left. Lo achal. He still didn't eat it. So Amar lahu. So Reb Pinchas ben Yair says to them, Dilma lo ma'asran. Maybe you didn't take Meiser. And so Asrinhu, they took Meiser, Vachal, and the donkey ate it. So Amar, Aniya, Zo, Holechas, La'asos, Riton, Kona, Va'atem, Ma'achilin, Otza, Tzivalim. You're gonna feed this animal, this poor creature is going to do Hashem's will because we're on our way to redeem the prisoners, and you are feeding it tevel. That's terrible. This is a donkey that doesn't eat demai. So umi mechayve, but 1 second. And by the way, although tevel often can mean vadai tevel, here we're going to see in a moment that it must be that we're referring to demai because of the Mishnah that we're about to see. Umi mechayva. 1 second. Are you liable to take the truma from animal food? Vatanan halokeach lezera v'levehima. If you buy food, this is demai perek aleph mishnah gimel. If you buy seeds if you buy produce and you're using it for seed, meaning you're using it to plant the seeds, v'levehema, or to feed your animals, the kemach la'orot, or you're using the flour to help with hides, meaning to help tan the hides, v'shemen l'ner, or you're buying oil for your lamp, v'shemen l'sukbo es hakelim, or you're buying oil to use on your vessels to have them be greasier and work better together. Patur mehadmai. None of that is food for a human, and therefore we're not going to impose on you the liability associated with demai. And so for that highlights that what we're talking about here must be demai, because if it was actual tebel, that wouldn't be true. So therefore, again, we have that demai is not liable. So hasam ha itmar Allah. But 1 second, you're right that in fact, if that were the case and this was food bought specifically for this animal, you would not be required to take trumas to take meiser from the demai. And so, but here. That's not the case. Hasam ha'idmarla. In that Mishnah in Demai, it was said about it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Lo shanu elel shel kachan mitchila lebehema." The only situation where you buy feed for an animal is if you originally bought the food for the animal. Aval kachan mitchila la'adam. But if you buy it thinking that you're going to use it for humans, the nimlach aleihen lebehema, and then you change your mind and change it to an animal, chayav la'aser. Even if you want to give it to an animal, it is obligated in meiser. V'hatanya, 1 second, we learned and v'hatanya, and we have a brisa that supports this. Halokeach peros min hashok, ishuk. If you buy a fruit from the marketplace, la'achila, to eat it, the nimlach aleihen, and again, this is also in connection with demai. And then you change your mind and decide that you're going to give it to an animal. You cannot give this to your own animal, and you can't give it to your friend's animal either. Unless you take the tithes. And so as a result, that is the story there. Now, it's interesting. Tosos here, top Tosos on the page, highlights that this aspect of the story, where basically it comes out that actually it was liable to take Meiser, is a little bit different from what we see elsewhere. Top Tosos, but Maseches Shkolim, Daf Chedem Abed, Umaseches Demai, Yerushalmi, Ubereshis Rabbah, Lo Mishanim, Midi. We don't answer anything to the question of why is it that its Meiser was going to be required. Ela Heshiv Lahem de Mechamra Anavshe, that it was just he was just being machmir on itself, the animal. So in any event, the bottom line is that it's just interesting to note that this story has a number of versions. Okay,
so this is food that's edible.
Sorry,
this is food that's edible. I think so because the halacha. I learned this just recently with the whole shir that if something is nevela, for instance, then one can give it to an animal. And it doesn't don't the food
Yes,
becomes
we're
so it's a little bit. Then one can give it to an animal. It doesn't need to take truma, mice, whatever it may be. I mean, of course, we're
well.
talking about animal instead of produce. I
Yeah,
understand that,
well,
but
then there's no miser with respect to an
right,
animal. I mean, obviously there's miser behemoth, but that's a completely different category
right. But
totally.
if the food were to become rotten, for instance, and not edible, one could give it to the animal. For instance, I don't.
Yes, well that certainly creates a different situation. We're dealing with in the end, we're saying that this barley was bought for humans and then
Right,
fed to the animal, and so that's why it was even though it was bought in the marketplace, and therefore it's only demai and not actual food that trumas and meisers were not taken.
right.
You're still liable to take the meiser. So Shama Rebbe hears, okay, so that, by the way, that's the end of this story with respect to the animal. But we're going to see that we're going to see now how righteous Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair was. On some level, I view this as it's interesting. I wonder whether the Gemara on some level is saying, hey, by the way, don't think if you think that you're the kind of righteous person that these kinds of things are going to happen, then you're not going to make a mistake, and therefore you don't have to be as careful. Think again, because listen to how great Pinchas ben Yair is. He's like levels above Rebbe, as we will see in a moment. Shama Rebbe hears that Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair is coming. Nafak Lape, he goes to greet him. Amrle, he says to him, Ritzon Chasa'odetzli, will you eat with me? Amr Lohain, he says yes. Tzavu Panav Shel Rebbe. Rebbe gets so excited, he becomes radiant. His face becomes golden, essentially. Amr Lo, Kimidumah. Ata Shemudar Hana Yisrael ani. So Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair is like, why you think that I had a neder that I don't benefit from any Jew? Of course not. Yisrael Kadoshim Hain. The Jewish people are holy. The issue is the following: Yesh ve'enlo. There are people who want to give me food, but they don't really have the food to give, and so I don't want to take it from them. Yeshlo ve'enarotze. And then there are some who they have the food, but they don't really want to give it to me, and so I don't take from them either. Uksiv, and it says, Al tilcham es lechem ra ayin va'al tisav mat amosav. So ki kimo sha'ar benafsho kain hu echol ushasei yomar lach v'libo bal imach. So what does that mean? So don't eat the bread of somebody with an ayin ra, meaning somebody who is not generous and a miser, and don't want what his good tasting food. Don't want his delicacies, as it's translated here. Ki kemosha, because like the one whose soul is embittered, so is this person. So meaning that won't
So it's his
want
food. No, his
what?
food. He's embittered. His food is embittered, right? Maybe or
No. The point is that the person who's giving you this food because he's a miser, your enjoying of the food is going to actually embitter him. Rather, right, and the point is, echol shusei yomar lach. He's telling you, eat and drink. Vilibo balimak, but his heart is not with you. Meaning, there are people who tell you to eat and drink, but they don't really mean it. And as a result, if you can tell that that's what they are, you should say no to them. And so that is why, even though there are some people who have, it's the Eino Rotze, they don't really want to give. V'ata Rotze v'yeshlach, and yet you. This is again Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair responding to Rebbe. But you, Rebbe, I know Rotze v'yeshlach. You want to give me, and you have the resources. Mia hashta misarhivna. But right now I'm hurrying. Milsa b'mitzvah katarachna, because I'm working to do a mitzvah. Ki adrana atina. But when I come back, I will come to you. Ailana ligabach. I'm going to come back to you. So, Kiasa, when he came back, Isrami, the following happened. Al ba'ahu pischa dahavu kaimin be kudnaisa chivrasa. That when he came back, he came into a door to Rebbe's house where there were kudnyasa chivrasa. Kudnyasa are mules, and chivrasa are white. So there were these white mules. Amar. So presumably saying to himself, but not really clear. Pinchas ben Yair says, Malach hamavis b'beiso shel zeh. The angel of death is in this house. Vani esod etzlo, and I'm going to eat with him. So what in the world does that mean? So let's take a look at Rashi. And again, now we'll keep a finger on Rashi for a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines up from the bottom of the narrow lines of Rashi on Zion and Mabet. Shama, I'm sorry, what does that mean? So Malach HaMavis, Shemaka, that when these animals do cause a wound, the Shuv Ein Hamaka Chayav Chaya, Kiddulah, come on. If a person will not survive their kick, okay? So as a result, Shama Rebbe v'nafik la'ape. Rebbe hears that basically Reb Pinchas ben Yair is going to leave, and he goes out and he goes to greet him. Amar le mizabnina lahu. I'll sell them. Amar le v'lifnei iver lo titein mikshol. But 1 second, you can't sell them to somebody else. You'll be giving them a problem. You'll be causing them to sin by having these animals. As Rashi tells us, next Rashi, just as it's prohibited for you to own these animals, asirin la'akrini, you can't, no, other people can't own them. And don't say that you're going to sell it to somebody who's not Jewish, who might not have the same prohibition. Ain mochrin lahem behemagasa, because you're not allowed to sell large animals to non-Jews.
You're supposed to kill them?
Well, we'll see. We're gonna see these. He's stuck basically. He has to keep them, and he can't do anything with them. So Rebbe responds back, all right, I'll make him hefker. All right. And as Rashi tells us, Eshlachem biarot de alma lahevger. I'll send them out into the wilderness, into the rest of the place, and make them hefker for the world. No, that doesn't work either. Mefashta hezeka. You're going to actually spread out or increase the harm. As Rashi says, next Rashi, demitoch shelo yeyu nishmarot. Now they won't be watched. Yir bunazikin. They're going to do more damage. Okay, so akarna lahu. I'll uproot them on some level. I'll take away their hooves. I'll cut their feet so that they aren't able to do damage. No, ikatsar balachayim. That would be painful to the creatures. You can't do that. Katilnalu. All right, I'll kill them.
Oh, okay, that's it.
No, ikabal tashkas. You're wasting the animals if you do that. It's interesting. Again, he does not say that it's tsar balachayim to kill them. So it's interesting. There are some who say from here that this highlights that tsar balachayim is essentially while they're alive. The fact that they are going to die if you kill them in a sort of like one fell swoop, that's not going to be tsar belachayim. But in any event, hava kamavatesh be tuva. So he had nothing else to say. So instead, he just begs with him. So gava tura benaihu. And when he begged a lot, a mountain came between them. Bacha Rebbe v'amar. So Rebbe wept and he cried and said, Ma b'chayehen kach. If this is what happens, namely, if a righteous person, in order to sort of not be involved in any kind of, not even be in the same place as something that could be involved in sin, and now a mountain grows in there to prevent them from being there, imagine what happens after they die. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina said, "Gedolim tzaddikim b'misasan yosef michayehem." Righteous people are even greater in debt than they are in life. How do I know? Shenemar bayahihem kovrim ish, that they were there burying somebody, a person. V'hinei ro es hagadud, and they saw this enemy army coming. V'yashlichu es haish b'kever Elisha. So they put the deceased, the dead body, into the grave that belonged to Elisha. And so in sending it to him, Elisha, the dead cadaver touched Elisha's bones. And immediately got up on his feet and effectively was alive again. And so Rashi tells us, one fourth line down, but when it came to Elisha in his life, ben Hashunamit, when he tried to help bring back to life the son of the Shunamite woman, Hutzrach Lasum Piv al Piv, Ve'inav al Inav, Uvakaish Rakamim. He needed to do a whole lot of stuff in order to bring the kid back to life. But here, just touching was sufficient. That highlights how dead tzaddikim are even greater than, have greater power than they have when they were alive. So
So is this
Amalek,
story, when he's talking, is this referring to Rebbe or to Reb Pinchas Ben Yair when the mountain went between them? Because Rebbe was having difficulty with the mules, right?
well,
So
Rebbe was trying to find a solution to the
right.
problem that Reb Pinchas Ben Yair had. And so, as a result of not being able to find an answer to that problem, he resorted to just begging Reb Pinchas to just have a meal with him. It's interesting that he didn't just suggest, well, why don't I go out and have a meal with you, outside the area? It just occurs to me, I don't know, maybe it didn't
Yeah,
occur
but
to
the
him,
mules
but
are still there. I mean, they still
no,
got to get
no.
rid
Why
of the
didn't he
mules.
go? Why didn't he say, "I'll bring my food to you"? Meaning, I'll let me host you not here, but somewhere else. I'll host you in your home, but I'll bring all the food.
But the mules are still there. He still got to go back home. The mules are in front of his
Yeah, the
house.
mules are at Rebbe's house. But the point is that Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair was not necessarily upset with Rebbe. Maybe that is the answer. The answer is that he was upset with Rebbe, that he wasn't as careful as he should be about not creating a dangerous situation for others. So that maybe that's the answer. But the bottom line is, it's interesting that he doesn't say, "Listen, why don't I come to you?" But in any event, the point is that Rebbe continues to beg to Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair that he should come eat with him. And the response of the world is to create a mountain so that effectively separating Rebbe and Reb Pinchas ben Yair, so no longer are they together. That's the way I understand this story.
So, but who's the tzaddik in this story? Is it
Oh,
Rebbe
Reb
or is it
Pinchas
Rebbe
ben
Yehud,
Yair is
Rebbe
the
Pinchas Ben Yair?
Reb Pinchas ben Yair is the tzaddik in the story, 100%. Rebbe is talking about Reb Pinchas ben Yair when saying, if even during the lifetimes of righteous, this is what happens, certainly when they pass away. So Amar le Reb Papa. So now questioning this teaching of Rabbi Chama, how can you use this story of Elisha as proof of anything? So Reb Papa says the following to Abaye: Amar le Reb Papa le Abaye, V'dilma lekiyume be birkasa to Eliyahu. Maybe this is really all fulfilling a bracha that Eliyahu gave to Elisha. Diksiv, because Elisha asked Eliyahu before they departed, "Vayihi na pishnayim beruchacha elai." Let there be a double portion of your spirit on me. And the Psukim continue, and Eliyahu says, "Yes, that will be the case." So Baye responds, "Amrle hachi." If that were true, meaning if in fact and therefore what? Therefore, the point is Elisha had only brought back to life one person, and yet he needed to bring back to life two people because Eliyahu had brought back to life one person. And so as a result, maybe that's why this was all just to fulfill the blessing of Eliyahu. How do you know, Rav Papa's asking, that this shows that the righteous are greater in death than in life? Maybe it was to fulfill Eliyahu's blessing. So Amrle, Abaye says back, the guy didn't really come back to life. And so as a result, that can't be the blessing. That can't be for the blessing of Eliyahu, because the blessing of Eliyahu was to truly bring somebody back to life. Because ihachi, if what you're saying was correct, that this was to fulfill the blessing, Hainu Detanya, what about the brisa that said on these psukim, al raglav amad, that the person stood on his feet, uleveto lo halach, but he didn't go home. Meaning he was able to get out of the grave of Elisha because he was not sufficiently righteous to be in Elisha's grave, but this was not a case of bringing back from the dead. So Elabamai Kayim. All right, well, if that wasn't the bringing back from the dead, one was the second, right? We need Elisha to have double the blessing of Eliyahu and therefore to bring back two people from the dead. What is the other situation?
Why?
What?
Why does Elisha have to bring back two versus Eliyahu bring back one?
Because that was the blessing that Eliyahu gave to Elisha, that Elisha should have double the spirit of Eliyahu. And so everything that Eliyahu did, Elisha should do twice. Okay, so to Kedama Rabbi Yochanan. So the second resurrection is like Rabbi Yochanan said. Sheripe tzaras Naaman. He healed Naaman's tzaras. Shehi shekula kames. Because somebody who has tzaras is like somebody who is dead. Because it says Shneamar in
Right, right.
connection with Miriam. Al natahi kameh. Don't let her be like somebody who's dead. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Lama Nikra Shman Yemim. Why are these mules called Yemim? She'ema Samu tell us ala briot. Right. So we're back to the story, to the earlier part of the story where these white mules are so problematic. They're called Emim because Yemim because they create awe and fear on other creatures. Dama Rabbi Chanina, as Rabbi Chanina says, Miyamai. In my days, and Rabbi Chanina was a doctor, Lo shalani adam al makas pirda levana v'chaya. There was no one who asked me about a white mule's kick, blow, and then survived. Oh, one second. We see plenty of people kicked by white mules who survived. No, the ema v'chayas. No, what it means is that he healed. The chazino demitze. We see that they heal as well. No, the chevran reish karaihu ka amrina. We're talking about where the feet have white tips. Not clear whether it's the tip of the toe, tip of the top of the foot, but in any event, the point is that it's only specific white mules that have this, and not every white mule. And so as a result, you can actually go back and say that it's the super white mule that we're talking about, that Rabbi Chanina is talking about, and that's the kind of white mule that Rabbi Pinchas saw that Rebbe had, and that's why he didn't want to go into his house. Okay, so Ein Od Milvado. So another teaching by Rabbi Chanina, having taught this one teaching by Rabbi Chanina. Sorry for not scrolling. The Torah says that in Dvarim Perek Dalid Pasuk Lamed Hey, it says that there's none besides Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So Amar Rabbi Chanina, Ba'afilu kishafim, even sorcery can't override it. As Rashi tells us, citing the Gemara that we're about to read, no trikon. Kishafim is an abbreviation of Makishin Pamalia Shalmala, that it's the denial or the rejection of the ministers of above. Shalo Gazru al Adam, that those ministers did not decree about a person, the Adam Zelamut, that this person is going to die. And yet, V'hu made Ayadek Shafim, and yet the sorcery is going to kill that person. So Hahi Itza, there was, and now showing that this is the case, there was a woman, the Havas Kamahadra Lemishkal Afra. She was trying to take some dust Mitusei Karev the Rabbi Chanina, from beneath the feet of Rabbi Chanina. Amrla, and he said to her, Shkoli, go ahead and take it. Lo mistaya milsech. It's not going to help you at all. Ein o milvadoksi, because the Torah says Ein o milvado. There's no one besides Hashem. But Rabbi Yochanan lama nikra shman kshafim. But Rabbi Yochanan says, why is it called kshafim? Shemakhishin pamalya shamala, because they contradict the ministers of above, meaning that it suggests that it does work. So no, shiny Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina was different than Nefisha Zechusei. He had lots of merits, and that's why he didn't have to worry about kshafim. V'amar Rabbi Chanina, ein adam nokif etzba'o milamata, ela im kain machrizin alav milamala. A person doesn't bang his finger. We're going to see that it really probably means toe here on earth, unless it's decreed from above. Shneamar me Hashem mitzadei gever konanu, that by Hashem are a strong man's footsteps established. Given that we're talking about footsteps, that's how I think it's probably means his toe, and that's how they translate it here. V'adam mayavin darko. So that first pasuk is from Tehillim Perek Lamed Zayin pasuk Kaf Gimel, and then in Mishlei it says V'adam mayavin darko. Does a person understand his path? Meaning, people don't understand where they're putting their feet, but God does understand. And so as a result, God knows whether or not we're going to stub our toe. Man does not. And so as a result, we only stub our toe if Hashem has decreed it. Amar Rebbe Lazar, dam nikov miratza kedam ola. If you have the blood flowing as a result of a bang stubbing some kind of a part of your body, so that can serve as like an ola sacrifice. Amarava, when is that true? Begudal yamin ubenikuf sheni. It's only true if it's your big toe and it's a second time, meaning your first time hasn't healed completely and you banged it again. Behutika azul dvar mitzvah, and you have to be going to do a mitzvah. But if you're going to do a mitzvah and you bang your toe twice, that second time is considered like bringing an ola. So Amru Elav al Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, and was said about Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair as we conclude this Gemara, Miyamav lo vatza al perusa she'ena shalo. He never would break bread. He never would have hamotzi with using bread that didn't belong to him. Umiyom she'amad al daito, and from when he was able to think clearly on his own. Lo nana misudas aviv. He didn't even benefit from food that his father would give him, meaning he felt a sense of responsibility for himself. Last Rashi on the daf, that's a birkat hamotzi. He wouldn't make the bracha of hamotzi. Shelo ratzel le'echol kazayas mishal acherim. He didn't want to benefit even from one kazayas of food that belonged to others. And so with that, we are now, over the last day or two, we've taken a break from the rules of slaughter. And so now we turn to the top of Daf Ched Amud Aleph, and the Gemara returns to our discussion of slaughter and knives. But for that discussion, you're going to have to stay tuned for tomorrow's Daf.
The Reb Pinchas ben Yair saw these white mules in front of Rebbe's house. Wasn't that a so what do I want to say? Not a gazette. Wasn't that an affliction or a concern, a danger to Rebbe, and not to Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair?
Well, I think the way I understand it is that Rebbe was obviously keeping these animals. They were his animals. That's completely clear from the story, because he offers to sell them as the first solution. So these were Rebbe's animals. Presumably they were watched over by Rebbe's people. Rebbe was a very wealthy man. And the point is that Rebbe Pinchas ben Yair was like, I don't want to be in a home of somebody who is not sufficiently concerned about the well-being of others that he would maintain these animals. And so that was the problem. And so as a result, Reb Pinchas ben Yair decides to leave the home, and ends up refusing to have the meal that he had hoped to have with Rebbe.
Well, I saw it completely differently when the beginning of the story. He's coming back to Rebbe. He said, I'm going to do a mitzvah. I can't eat with you now. He comes back to Rebbe and he sees these white mules. He didn't see them before. And he didn't, at least we don't know that. I mean, we didn't know.
No, presumably he didn't see them before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to have the meal.
But so maybe in the backyard, whatever. But as far as he knew, there were no such white mules. So that makes my contention even stronger. He comes back and he sees these white mules and he says, that's Malach HaMavet. So there's a Malach HaMavet, and he thinks, no, this is a home of someone who's going to pass away. How can I eat a meal with him? So Rebbe is destined to die at that moment. So that
is not how the commentaries understand it, because the bottom line is that Rebbe doesn't seem to have died right away, and Rebbe goes out and he argues with him to come eat with him anyway. And the answer and the response, if the mules were just a sign, so then you would expect that there would be some method of getting around the sign. Clearly, the fact that he can't sell the mules, and because it would be a violation of lifnei iver lo titein michshol, it clearly indicates that the problem that Reb Pinchas ben Yair had with Rebbe having these mules was not that it was a symbol of something, but rather that ownership itself was problematic.
So how does he say? How does it come that the Gemara says this? the white mules is a sign. It says in the beginning, this is Malach HaMavet.
Yeah, what it means by that is that these mules are Malach HaMaves because the kicks that they give, that was why I quoted that Rashi. Rashi said, because the kicks that they give are not healable. That you don't come back from a kick from that mule. That was what Rabbi Hanina said. Rabbi Hanina closed the loop on the story by saying that I never saw somebody get kicked by a mule like this and come back and survive. That's the point. So the point is that these mules are dangerous animals. You know, if you ever wanted a discussion, if you wanted to have a shear about whether or not you could keep a monkey or an orangutan in your private sanctuary in your home, this would be a very important source for that discussion. They're wild animals. They're very dangerous animals. You shouldn't keep them in your home. That's effectively what Rabbi Pinchas Ben Yair is saying.
So what isn't that? So that is isn't this? So then it's a source of danger. And then why wouldn't Rebbe then also be subject to the same danger?
Yeah, he is. He is. The point is that at the end of the day, once he's made the step of owning the animals, the safest thing he can do is keep them himself. He can't send them out to the wilderness because they'll be more likely
Yeah,
to do
okay, I
damage,
understand. I
and
thought,
he
oh,
can't
that's so.
sell it. He can't kill them. There's nothing he can do with them. All he can do with them is continue to use them and watch over them as best as he can. That he's stuck. There's no solution other than his keeping. But the fact that he has them is a sufficient concern for Rebbe Pinchas Ben Yair to say, I don't want to eat with a person who's having these animals
Because
because they're dangerous animals and he shouldn't have had them in the first place. The problem was he bought them in the first place or inherited, however he got them. The problem was he bought them in the first place. Now there's nothing to be done about it. He's got to watch them and make sure that they don't do any
yeah,
more damage. But that's the issue that is discussed here. It's
Christina,
not
but
just when I read it the first time. Also, I thought maybe this is some kind of sign or something. But it's clear from the rest of the Gemara, and clearly Rashi understands it this way as well. That clear from the rest of the Gemara that the issue is that these are dangerous animals that shouldn't be in somebody's possession, and it would have been way better if they were never in his possession. But now that they're in his possession, there's nothing he can do about it, and he just has to keep watching over them and make sure that they don't do any damage. And in fact, it's better that they're owned in this case because if God forbid they do damage, then Rebbe will be able to pay the person who is damaged with it and recompense them. Otherwise, if they're wild, there's nobody's gonna nobody would pay anything for them. So it's important that they continue to belong to Rebbe. All right, we will pick up, God willing,
well,
from the
what?
top of
I mean,
Femina.
I hear it, but initially it doesn't. Yeah, okay, I hear that, but
Give
initially
thought. I'm happy to take any questions tomorrow. So give thought. If you still have a question tomorrow, come on, and we'll happy to discuss it further. I'm going to end the recording.